Welcome back to the Lockdown Library. We have rattled to the end of series 3. I can't believe it. I hope you're all joining me with, I'm going to say it should be Southern Comfort, but actually that's way too sweet for me. So I've got a wee dram of a different, slightly sterner whiskey kind of type chap. Because of course today we are celebrating the late great Janis Joplin. So I'm going for a bit of festival vibes here. I'm got my sequins on, got my glitter on. She would have had feathers like a boa in her hair, as well as these big colourful flowers. But I'm vegan, so I don't have feather boas, so I've gone for extra big colourful flowers. And of course, I'm basically doing that because she is sort of the female face of the birth of the festival scene and the rock scene, with her iconic performances at Monterey Pop and Woodstock. Really the birth of everything that we think of as being festivals and rock and roll concerts today, which is really lovely. And I've come home, I'm shooting, as you can see behind me, the kind of placid blue sea and the restful harbour of a little town opposite where my little town is in Cornwall. Not by barely even a breeze today, I don't think, on that by blue water to disturb those little white boats. Because I grew up here and it's a small town, and even though it's a much nicer small town than the one that Janis grew up in, if you grow up somewhere small and you don't completely fit, you run the risk of completely standing out, and that can be difficult. And I think that's something that goes through Janis's whole story, which is a short one because, of course, she still dies when she's really young. 27 is really young. So she's probably still sorting all that stuff out that we all encountered as teenagers, and hopefully most of us got to work on. And I wish she'd had the chance. So where she grew up is a lot uglier than where I'm standing in front of. No nice green trees and placid waters for her. She grows up in Port Arthur in Texas, which is an industrial town. And it's the 50s, it's very uniform, it's very repressive. People are just starting to talk about whether we should start to be integrating the town and the schools between blacks and whites. And Janis and her friendship group are very vocal about saying, yes, we should definitely be integrating. This racism is ridiculous. And that is part of why she has a really, really shit time with basically her peer group, who bully her really horribly, particularly the kind of jocks, the guys in that group, that kind of, they really give her like a horrible teenage time. And a lot of that is to do with her anti-racist stance, as well as her general lack of female conformity, because she totally rejects the idea of wearing makeup and bras and things right when everyone else is coming out of the 50s and trying to be the prom queen and all those things and have the white picket fence and everything. So it's strange to think that people would be challenged by that, but they are, and they very much were then as well, of course. So she grows up in a set that have that absolutely love the blues, and the first person that she tries to do an impression of, to try and emulate, is Odetta. And there is a bit of a debt then to the whole blues movement, which I think is really interesting and becomes a source of a lot of controversy. How much are you admiring and emulating? How much are you ripping off your heroes? But certainly Odetta spoke very warmly of Janis Joplin and said anytime they were on the same bill, once Janis was also a big star, she was thanking her profusely in front of all the crowds and things. Which is quite interesting. And quite often when Janis is experimenting with her own sounds and her songs, she's trying to work in these blues, these real emotions that she thinks these women are having, rather than this kind of staid, buttoned down lifestyle she sees there. The expression of kind of the rich, wild emotions that really draws her towards blues and the blues scene. Obviously, a lot of that again is projection and stuff that we might pick apart now, but certainly you can see why someone who didn't fit the conformity of her own era might be looking for a different set and a different sound. So she makes, she's very famous for doing Piece of My Heart, for example, which is originally a Franklin and a much more slick version than Janis did, all that I'm about to do, but that Janis loved and made very famous as well. Didn't I make you feel like you were the only man, yeah? And didn't I give you nearly everything a woman possibly can? Honey, you know I did. But each time I tell myself that I think I've had enough, well, I'm gonna show you, baby, that a woman can be tough. I want you to come on, come on, come on, come on and take it. Take another little piece of my heart now, darling. Break it, break another little piece of my heart now, baby. Have it, just have another little piece of my heart now, baby. You know you got it if it makes you feel good. Now, of course, part of the thing about the blues is that it's a lot of singing about how much you will let your man do you wrong, which is interesting, because one of the things that Janis Joplin does is, of course, she has a very different take on sexuality to everyone else in her generation as well. She's at the beginning. The thing that she does is ride the curve of everything that's happening, which is so often, people say it's about being in the right place at the right time, because it's so often part of being a big star. But actually, of course, it's also about catching these waves as they're cresting rather than seeing afterwards that they've rolled upon the beach. So she has, because of her extrovert persona and her beatnik sort of look when she's growing up in this small town, she gets a reputation for being a slut because people don't really understand her. And it's very easy to get that reputation when you're a teenager as well, if you speak openly about sex or things that you like, and getting high and stuff like that. I certainly remember people assuming that I had lost my virginity like years earlier. That I was quite late at all that stuff, but because I was open about what I had done, it was like you hoped one or the other, slut or whore or virgin and good girl, and that's way more of a big thing when she's growing up, of course, as I say, in the 50s and early 60s. So she keeps this kind of persona, this shock value of being like a hypersexual person for the rest of her sort of public life. But she performs a lot of heterosexuality, but she's actually very kind of actively bisexual as well. And never, I think her own insecurities about her own looks and the way that she's treated by it when she's young, about as written off as being like ugly and awkward, that kind of feeds into her thing of like, I like sleeping with women, but I feel like I've really earned it if I sleep with a guy. There's a lesbian magazine that puts her in there as a kind of hails her as a kind of icon of the gay scene, and she's furious backstage one night. She says, "You tell these women that Janis Joplin has slept with thousands of guys and hundreds of girls." So it's like there's almost like a sort of point scoring that she's doing of herself and her value of herself as a woman, which I think is really interesting and a bit of a shame. And again, she might well have grown out of and become settled with, because some of the longest, most prolonged relationships in her life were with kind of her close female friends, though she ran in a very, very masculine world, which we'll talk about a bit more in a bit. The weird thing about her looks as well, of course, is she's another one of those women who gets talked about. Again, I've talked to in previous salons this season about Marilyn Monroe and Judy Garland and people who get every now and then, she was going through a chubby phase then and things like that. And she gets called that a lot, chubby. And ugly, and of course she I don't think I've seen any photos of her, even when she's on heroin and she's eating a lot of sweets, that she's not actually chubby. She's just not really, really skinny, and actually most of the time she's really skinny. She's a small built woman, and it goes back to that thing where if you don't quite fit in, a really easy mean way of writing you off is to say chubby or ugly, when really what we mean is maybe non-compliant. I think she's non-compliant looking, and that's really exciting about her. And obviously, who is the arbiter of no one gets to the arbiter of what's attractive or not else, because that's just not how it works. It's all subjective, isn't it? I love the pictures of her where she's just sort of smiling and hanging out with her friends in Haight-Ashbury, and I think she is really beautiful. And her long-term lover, Peggy, who was a big part of that scene as well, always said, I just thought she was really beautiful. So I think she falls into this thing of like, you can be this actually shocking person set up when you're a teenager to rebel against the community that you don't want to be in, but then doesn't get you and that you don't agree with morally, but actually also you still want to be liked. And that is a really hard line to tread. That's a real dichotomy, especially when you're in a culture that is so conditional about the approval it gives women. And one of the things that she did, as well as like rejecting all this kind of 50s, batten down the emotions, put on all the layers of makeup, just take the drugs if you need to, the prescription medication kind of stuff, to make yourself fit in and don't feel those depressive feelings, is that she really, really wants to take other people with her. She has this great quote about her desire to kind of wake up the people, the other kids that are coming to her shows. So she says, kids from the Midwest, their whole fucking thing is to sit in row Q7 and be still. It never occurred to them they could not go in the army. If you could just get to them once, like get them standing up when they should be sitting down, sweating when they should be decorous, smile when they should be applauding politely, I think you sort of switch on their brain so that it makes them say, wait a minute, I can do anything. And that's really interesting. And she really rated herself in her shows on how she managed to get all the people up up from their seats. And when the gigs that she was doing started to move from these very sort of niche things in Haight and Asbury and big falling down buildings into kind of like properly managed town and city halls, and then even later into arenas, the kids in her audiences would come against the police because they were because the police were like, sit back down, and she'd be like, well, I can't tell you because I'll get arrested again, but what the hell are you doing sitting down? This is a rock and roll gig. So there was this dichotomy between her and the police that did get her arrested a couple of times as well, and she's banned from some places. I think it's might be Hudson. Anyways, there's a couple of towns across America that just say she's banned because of her attitude, which I just love. Kind of aspirational thing to be banned for. So I think it would have been, again, she's coming right before, like she's kind of in cutting her teeth in her own scene, right before there's anyone else doing it there for her and with her. She doesn't have a bank of radical feminism or sisterhood to kind of draw from. And I would have loved her to have had that. And so I'm going to just quickly read you a poem that I think kind of speaks to that from one of my favourite. I brought this in late in the programme, so I'd really like to thank Anna Maria Murphy for letting me read it. It's a fantastic poem that she wrote for a feminist event we did down here with Kapow. And I just asked if I could, it suddenly occurred to me like last night, I should definitely do this one as well. So thank you so much, Anna. You're such a legend. And I wish we could have read this to Janis. This is called Bin the Sin. Eve stood in the garden of... I'll start that again because I'm just going to ruin Anna's nice words if I don't get the pacing exactly right. Eve stood in the garden of Eden. So many wonders, so many plants she named by their colour and scent, so many seeds she had sung into being. And there, in the middle, was the apple tree. Was the tree, the apple tree. Laden with every variety of apples there was. Coxes, orange pippins, gala russets, Norfolk beauties, Gascoigne scarlets, pink ladies, to name but a few. Adam had told her not to pick any apples from this tree. He had sat under it one burning hot day, and the juice from a split skin had fermented and dripped into his open, dreaming mouth. Cider, he said, as the amber liquid caressed his throat and stirred his loins. To Eve, he said, I wouldn't eat any of those apples, love. Why not? Said Eve. God said so. I never heard her. When did she say that? Came to me in a dream. If you eat one, you'll be cast out, ashamed. And, he stammered desperately, trying to think of something. And we'll know things that are forbidden. It's forbidden fruit. Eve smelt a rat, as there were many in the Garden of Eden. Annoyed, she left Adam to sleep alone in their grassy bower, and she slumbered under a tree. In her restless sleep, she foresaw all the women who were told not to stray from the path, not to open the box, not to unlock the door, not to wear the red shoes. Red Riding Hood, Bluebeard's latest wife, Pandora. The list is long. Eve woke with a start. Apple for breakfast, she said. She plucked a deep red one and took the biggest bite from it. And she knew at once that there is no shame. There is no blame for a girl to know. Bin the sin, she carved in the tree's trunk. Love and courage, Eve. Well, a moment of love and courage kind of comes for Janis when she finds her own people finally in San Francisco. And again, she's just like ahead of that curve. She's right before, like the Summer of Love is when it just kind of peaks and is a massive kind of corporate fest, and suddenly it's flooded and it's kind of over. And the next year you've got Charlie Manson and his family exploiting the kind of sexist kind of tradition, like weird traditions of the hippie movement that hasn't been so brilliant for women. It's been very like, oh, women just kind of can be free and easy to look after us and have our babies and not take very good sexual care of themselves, and we won't take care of them either, kind of thing. There's a whole load of like hippie crap that comes with that, basically, that is really, really dark. But she's kind of there around when it's just getting itself, and it only has Haight and Asbury really a couple of summers before that, where they're actually really experimenting, and there is this sense of you include each other, and there isn't this huge gulf between gigs and fans. And she's right in the centre of all that, and she turns up looking like a bit of a beatnik, and then immediately goes, oh, no, hippie culture is slightly different, and dons all these kind of vintage clothes and puts the feathers and the flowers in her hair. And she really then becomes like this kind of hippie pin-up, which must be a massive weird head rush from being this kind of like supposedly ugly girl at school. And then she's performing a lot of her hypersexuality, and she's talking about, we have these great playlists that DJ Stegosaurus has done for every episode, and there's a really lovely one that he's done for this one, and it has a song by Leonard Cohen in it, where he talks about probably about her, and says that she would say to him, you know, usually I'd go for a handsome guy, but for you I'll make an exception, kind of thing in the song. But that's the thing, so she's very funny and very, very smart and very articulate, which no doubt is also something that isn't so popular when you're a teenage girl. If you think about the songs that she went on to write, they're often clever plays on words and things, and tackle that kind of Bible Belt tradition that mixes with corporate capitalist America, and that perhaps the hippies are right to be so cynical about. So before they become objects of cynicism themselves, of course. I'm just gonna sing say for you like she would Mercedes-Benz, because she actually co-wrote the words of this. It's a kind of thing that she riffed off with some friends, and it's just so smart, and it just does a really funny job of taking apart corporate religious America, which I really like. Oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz? My friends all drive Porsches, I must make amends. Worked hard all my lifetime, no help from my friends. So Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz? Oh Lord, won't you buy me a colour TV? Dialing for dollars is trying to find me. I wait for delivery each day until 3. So Lord, won't you buy me a colour TV? Oh Lord, won't you buy me a night on the town? I'm counting on you, Lord, please don't let me down. Prove that you love me and buy the next round. Oh Lord, won't you buy me a night on the town? Everybody, come on. Oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz? My friends all got Porsches, I must make amends. Worked hard all my lifetime, no help from my friends. So Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz? It's just great, isn't it? And then, of course, by the time she's 25, she's worked really hard, and she's developed this specific sound, and she's been part of this specific scene, and she's suddenly like hugely famous. Imagine being like hugely famous and one of the only women at your level of fame in this very new style of music at 25. Like, no wonder it's really hard for her not to just get really hung up on like basically smack and heroin, which everyone says is like the route back to the loving womb of your mother. So she's you know, it must be a heavy thing to bear. I would like to point out though that she's still doing interviews at this time that are so lovely, that she talks about with great humour about her and pathos about her growing up in a small town, but she also manages to say the word groovy with absolutely no irony, with absolute sense of like love and genuineness that I've never heard it said like before ever, and I'm sure you can't say it again since. And this is where it becomes a bit strange as well. This point where she's a very famous pin-up. This is where, when I was starting to research all this, it became she started to really. I was having the same sort of thoughts about her as I was having about Marilyn Monroe when I was preparing that Salon a couple of episodes ago. Which they seem so unlikely, but actually there are all these overlaps when you come to analyse them. There are discussions all the time about both of them, but with their feminist icons. And in some ways they can both be very sisterly. A story I forgot to tell you about Marilyn Monroe is that, and that TJ, my lovely guest in that episode, reminded me of, is that there was a very important venue that wouldn't programme Ella, that would have kind of broken her into the really mainstream fame, Ella Fitzgerald. And Marilyn Monroe was a big fan and a friend of Ella Fitzgerald, and she pushed them to take her, and they said she's not glamorous enough. And Marilyn was like, this is ridiculous. She's a paramount artist. You know, she's fabulous. If this is glamour that you want, I will come. You put her on for a month. I will come every single night and watch her. And I will sit in the front row, and that will be the glamour if you want it. But I'll be watching her, and so will everyone else. And she did it. They programmed her. Ella Fitzgerald played, and Marilyn Monroe watched her every night for a month. And you know, the rest is history. And there's a similar thing with the way that Janis Joplin was with Odetta, the way that she helped make sure that Bessie Smith, her great love and an icon and idol, had a proper gravestone, which she wouldn't otherwise have had. But then there's also this massively problematic side where Janis is really competitive with other women, and particularly as she's getting more famous, she's getting more frightened of other people being up on that pedestal with her. She doesn't keep a lot of women in her entourage. She even jokes about it when she's on the kind of the Festival Express train about there not being any. Someone asks her why there weren't more girls in her band, and she's like, "Well, I want to be the only girl," because she's anxious about what her status would be if she's not the only one. Because she's in this very male world that, again, is very conditional about how it chooses women and what their looks like have to be in order for them to be valid and visible. And there's a lot of things around that you can say about any sex symbol, and Marilyn Monroe's particular compliancy. It sort of excludes other women from being empowered, in my opinion, because it's about being complicit to what men want. But they also both create these iconic looks that then define their era. You know, when we think about the sex pots of the 50s and going into that early 60s period, we're talking about Marilyn Monroe. When we think about hippie chic and festival rock and female icons of that, you know, we're talking about the look that Janis creates and then publicises. And they both then get sort of trapped by those iconic images they've created as well. They have to keep doing those, being that person, because that's their success. Janis has to keep partying and shocking people, and maybe that's not good for anyone to do for a huge amount, like most of their life. And the thing about them both as well is they both wanted to be taken seriously. They were both seriously good at what they did, and they worked seriously hard, and they wanted to have a seriously good time. So it's very interesting. But I feel really sad that one of the things that happened to Janis about keeping women out of her world, that like I just said, it also meant that after a show, it's really quiet for you if you're not a guy in the band. The guys get dressed up, you know, go have a shower and come down, and there's groupies for them. And it isn't like that for women. And I'm going to read you an extract now. This is the last bit of reading I'm going to do. Then we're going to just do a last song, and then we'll say goodbye, which will be really sad because it's been an amazing season with you. But hopefully we'll all meet up outside soon, and that'll be even better. But yeah, I think that I'm going to read you an extract now that talks about the ways in which the music industry is different for men and women. And if you think about this is written by the lead singer from Sleeper, who were a 90s like indie pop huge band at the time, and it's a really good autobiography. You should definitely read it, and it's called "It's Different for Girls." And this, if you think about how much of the thick end of the wedge Janis would have been getting, because it's so much earlier in the scene and the times are even more sexist, I think this account is really interesting, and it throws a light on what it must have been like, but even more so for Janis. So this sets the scene of where we'd got to by the end of my time at university, when I was looking at what had been these great icons of pop for me that seemed to be just standing out and going to lads mags, and I was confused by it. It's amazing when I found this bit of the autobiography and was like, oh, thank God, I thought that was what's happening, but I thought I was going mad. So this is by Louise Weiner. She says, "The frank, gutsy women fronting guitar bands have been watered down with giggly girl power. What happened to that battle? That slice of rock and roll sexual equality that we came for? It started with an attempt to level the playing field, but ended in something quite different, altogether tamer and more dilute. You wake up one morning in the midst of beer-swilling, coke-filled, self-important, macho parody that is Britpop's death rattle, and say, haven't we been here before? Justine of Elastica aping Christine Keller on the front of Select. Sonia from Echo Belly falling out of her shirt in ID. Keris from Catatonia pouting half naked on the cover of a lads mag. And how the hell did I end up being photographed in a wet look PVC catsuit? Carrying a gun, I look ridiculous, like sexy licorice. This wasn't part of the plan. This isn't the girl from L7 pulling her pants down on the word to reveal her big hairy bush. This is neutered and neat, conformist and traditional, same as it ever was. Indie playboy. Don't be stupid. Look what we've won. The right to go on the town with Zoe Ball and throw up until we puke, and rave all night and take our kit off in loaded and call ourselves ladettes. The right to have celebrity fashion photographers ask us to undo extra buttons on our shirt at every photo shoot. The right to be replaced by airbrushed, apolitical, muppety versions of ourselves like Natalie Imbruglia. It's not how I saw it. This feels like a corruption. I don't think I like what we've started. So if this is to be our last tour, then we'd better make it a good one. There are more drugs and more drinks and everyone's as ruined as they've ever been. But more so. It's grubby and filthy and oddly glamorous still, but it's just as often the land of the stupid, corroded and difficult to love. The groupie situations ends up on another level. Our support bands are all boys, pretty ones, some of whom take a lot of cocaine. One night we're holed up in a hotel bar halfway through the tour and the pretty boys are holed up in the toilets. The groupies are here, hunting in slack-jawed, mini-suited packs, traipsing back and forth through to the bar, to the toilets and back again. I lose count of how many girls there are and how often they traipse back and forth. John's mum is in the bar with us. She's been to see us play. Did you enjoy the gig? Oh yes, I loved it. Her partner nudges her on the shoulder. He seems distracted. Where are those lot going then? He says suspiciously. Who? All those young lasses, back and forth to the toilets all the time. They've got no tights on either, says John's mum. Oh, it's January, they must be freezing outside. Why have none of them got any tights on? What can I say? They're both lovely people. I've had Sunday dinner at their house. I can't tell them they've gone to snort the support band's coke off the cistern and then give them repeated rounds of sex and blowjobs. I'm sure it's nothing, I say unconvincingly. They've probably all got cystitis. I'm used to this scenery now. The band members who have sex with the same girl at the same time at the back of the tour bus. The band members who hide from irate fathers, checking up on the whereabouts of their underage daughters. The hangers-on who fritter our tour budget on prostitutes. The groupies who come on to Andy when I'm sitting right there. The Japanese girl in the thigh-high leather boots, last spotted in the lobby of Tokyo Hotel, now evidently shagging various band members as a way of ensuring free passage from Glasgow to Hull and then to London. I'm thinking about telling her to get shorter boots. I'm thinking about outlining the benefits of a rail card. I regularly think about telling the toilet groupies that the boys take the piss out of them afterwards and they could all do much better. It's too early to say what regrets I'll have, but I bet one of them won't be not getting enough oral sex from 16-year-old boys in the urinals. It is, I think, different for girls. So yeah, I'm thinking more and more in my own practice, particularly as I've been doing these salons celebrating all these amazing women and recognising their power and the hardships that they had to embrace their power. But what a great thing it is to look at their power and enjoy it and find our own and use that to harness what might be in all of us. I'm thinking a lot about the importance of creating spaces of unconditional love, especially for women, so that we can just get on with all that and not be thinking about how we look and who we are in relation to other, particularly men, all the time. And I think that's what the place I've come to with Janis. I wish she'd been able to let more women around her, because then she might not have been on her own that night when I don't think she meant to commit suicide. There was no one there to pull her back from the OD, because everyone else on the band after the show was out with their groupies and she was on her own in her hotel room. So I'm going to finish by singing you the only song she wrote, because she dies at a really annoying time. Not that there's probably ever a not annoying time, but she's just finally pulled together the band of her dreams that get her, and she's just making Pearl, and it's such a strong... It's the first time we really see the potential that she could have, I guess. If she's backed up by the right people and she's getting into the right place. And she doesn't write many of her own songs, but this is the one that she completely wrote all together herself, music and words. So I thought I would finish with that, and I've got 2 more seasons coming up. They're in the bank. The Wonderful Arts Council paid for them. I'm going to collaborate with some amazing people, including Dr. Naomi Paxton, aka De Camp. So please just watch out for us. Tune back in. Can't wait to see you again. But this is to finish off to the wonderful Janis Joplin. I wish you'd got to write more. Say that it's over, baby. You say that it's over now, but you hang around me. Won't you move over? You know that I need a man. Ha! You know that I need a man. But when I ask you to, you just tell me, maybe you can. Please don't you do it to me, babe. Please don't you do it to me, babe. Either take this love I offer, or just let me be. Ain't quite ready for walking. Ain't quite ready for walking. What you gonna do with your life, or just dangling? Make up your mind, honey. You're playing with me. Make up your mind now, darling. You're playing with me now. Now either be my loving man, or honey, let me be. Say that it's over, baby. Say that it's over now. Still you hang around me. Come on, baby, move over. Papers over, guitar smashed, drink everywhere. No, not really. I'm not as butch as Janis. Good night. Hope to see you again very soon. Lots and lots of love. Cheers, cheers, chin chin, toi toi, push hearts.